We are go.
Okay, hello everyone. Happy Friday and welcome to our virtual book party. If we were in person, there would be applause. Today we are going to be celebrating these three lovely authors I have with me today and their new releases coming up. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump straight into introductions so can get on to the fun part. So first, I have with me author Taj McCoy, and today we are celebrating her newest release, The Good Ones Are Taken. Next, we have author Tiff Marcello, and today we are celebrating her newest release, It Started with a Secret. And last but certainly not least, we have Adele Buck, and her newest novel that we are celebrating today is Fake Flame. Amazing. So I'm going to go ahead, go off camera, and leave the chatting to you three. I'm very excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You.
So I put together a list of questions just to kind of get us going, and I figured we could just start there and see what happens. But the first one, of course, is always the obvious one, right? That icebreaker of, in terms of your most recent release, what would be your 2-minute elevator pitch? And Adele, I will start with you.
Ah. Um, I wrote a book. I don't know. It's about stuff. Um, well, basically, my two-minute elevator pitch is more about the inspiration for it, because back in 2017, there was this news story about this guy in England who was going to play the piano on the town green until his ex took him back. And we all know that that isn't the first thing he tried, right? She's already said no in like probably 100 different ways. And I just the story kind of intrigued me. Spoiler alert, apparently the guy got punched in the head finally, and that's what made him stop. Um, and my initial reaction was, I want to set his piano on fire. And then I thought, well, that's not a romance. And then I thought, wait, what if a meet cute was with one of the firefighters who's called to the scene?
There you
And
go.
that's how we got started.
I love it. I love it. Tiff, what about you?
Yeah, so oh my gosh. Well, first of all, the thank you for having me. And I love seeing your faces together and all of us in one screen. But yeah, so my book is a secret baby age gap story. And if the secret baby is grown up and returned home to a family who doesn't expect him. And the meet cute is with Jared and Matilda, and Jared meets Matilda in some bar and doesn't realize that she actually works for the B&B the family of his late father belongs to. Okay, so that is pretty much the elevator pitch. I cannot do anything shorter than that. And then we can go from
No, that's
there.
great. That's great. Mine is a friends to lovers romance. It is a continuation of Savvy Sheldon Feels Good as Hell. And so this story is about Savvy's best friend Maggie, who is being forced to find a date to two of her best friend's weddings. And so she goes through online dating hell to try to find someone, only to meet a handsome heart surgeon at the gym. And as she's getting to know him and seeing that he's checking a lot of her boxes, her male best friend Garrett kind of drops a bomb on her and lets her know that he has been in love with her since college. And now she has to decide whether she's willing to take a risk to be in love. And so it's a lot of drama, but it's a lot of fun.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, okay. In becoming romance authors, was there a definitive romance novel that really like brought you to reading romance or writing romance? And how did you decide that writing romance was for you? Tiff?
So I've always been a lifelong reader, but never really considered myself a romance reader. I think while I was such a big reader, I wasn't really aware of the different genres, right? Because I was a library goer and I would go to fiction, or I would, right? Or I would go to children's, and I just knew where they were in the library and I would just kind of comb through. So Twilight brought me to this feeling of like, oh my gosh, what is this? And then the term, this is a romance novel, really it kind of landed in my brain. But I wouldn't say I was a total romance reader until like my husband was deployed. And that was when the Kindle really blew up. So early days. And I would just go from one book to the other. I would just keep clicking links, and then it would like shoot me over to a different romance novel. And I would just read like from the moment the kids went to bed until I could fall asleep. And it was night after night. So I would say that I am a very early, I have a lot to learn because it was like in the early 2000s, I would say. So yeah, that's where that's my romance reading history.
I love it.
Yeah.
Adele?
Was trying to like piece together like the threads because I'm probably older than both of y'all by a lot. And when I was a kid, the Good Housekeeping magazine would have sandwiched in the middle on cheap paper a category romance novel every month. And I would go out to visit my grandmother in Indiana in July, and I would be bored as heck, and I would just absolutely consume these things by the pound. And that didn't necessarily make me think about being a romance reader, but I had really early exposure to these. And so when I went through the kind of almost inevitable, backlash, no, they're not for me, whatever kind of, thing that we internalize. And then when I during the heavy duty blogging years, I was a reader of Rachel Herron's blog.
I read her too. I read her
I-
blog too. Wow, that's neat.
Yeah, and well, I came to her via knitting
Yes,
because
and I'm a knitter too through Ravelry.
yeah,
I
well,
found it through
yeah, and
Ravelry. Okay.
so
so
I
wild.
I followed a bunch of knit blogs, and I kind of
Mhm.
discovered her through that, and I kind of followed her along as she talked about going on this journey of becoming
Yes.
a romance author, and there was something about it that just really appealed to me. And then so I started reading much more voraciously in the genre. And around the time when I really started writing, I was also in a fandom for the Miss Fisher mysteries. And so I started writing my first manuscript. I think it would have been my first manuscript. Maybe I was already in the middle of writing it. And we had a Slack instance. And after I finished a scene, I would just post it to the Slack instance, and I would get this almost immediate feedback. It was almost like I was writing fan fiction, but I wasn't. And those ladies, I swear to God, they just spurred me on. And I wrote several books that way with this kind of immediate, like instant gratification of people saying, "Oh, I like it, keep going."
Yeah.
And then I finally, I just embrace it. It was like this genre is fun and I'm enjoying it. And I, started on social media, started like meeting some of my heroes. I mean, I remember when Victoria Dahl followed me back on Twitter, and I just nearly lost my mind. And I met Suzanne Brockman. Suzanne Brockman blurbed this book, for crying out loud. What is happening? Right? That kind of thing. I started meeting some of my heroes and just loving the community. And that's kind of how I got here.
I love it.
Awesome. I love that.
How
Yeah.
about you, Taj?
God. So we were avid library goers when I was a kid. And so we would go every Friday, and I would check out 10 books because that was the limit every week.
Mhm.
And when I was 10, I was in 5th grade. That was when I started moving over to the adult side. And I checked out a book by Victoria Holt, having no idea what was going to be in that book. But it piqued my interest enough that I just kept going back because there were so many of them. And as I got older and, chick lit started to be a thing, I started to get into that. And I was reading Terry McMillan and Eric Jerome Dickey also. And I was just hooked. And I think Eric Jerome Dickey, my favorite book of his came out in 2000. And I think Confessions of a Shopaholic came out like the next year, and I was in college. And I I was trying to major in English, and you know, certain cultures, my parents were like, "What are you gonna do? Why would you major in English? No, you have to change it." And so they were like, medicine, business, law, like
I was a theater major, okay?
yeah, that would never have been allowed in my family. And so I had to change from English. And so my rebellion was reading all of these books and writing on the side. And so when I was in law school, that was when I attempted my first novels. And I just couldn't give it up. I just kept coming back to it, and writing ended up kind of being my safe space. It's the place where I feel like I express myself the best. And it if I'm not doing it for any long period of time, I feel out of sorts. It's my self-care. And so here we are.
I love it. I know for the longest time when I was writing, I didn't realize it was romance that I was writing. Like even as I was, growing and writing in my diaries and writing all these scenes, looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, they were all just love scenes over and over and over and over. Like it was not, substantiated with any kind of plot or any kind of characterization. It was just the meet cute or the first kiss or the first fight.
Yes.
And then looking back, I'm like, wow, it really is. I was doing it for so long, even though I wasn't really wanting to do it for so long, right? Because I was a nurse, so I was steered that direction and super focused there, but also just writing these love scenes or thinking up love scenes. It's so interesting how that happens.
So are writing the love scenes your favorite part of writing romance?
Not really, because I feel the pressure, right? Because now that I've written so many books, I really want to be able to deliver. Because I want to be able to give it to the reader. So I always gloss through the love scenes first, and then I go back and I try to really get rid of the pressure, and then just try to write it as instinctively as I can. But yeah.
What about you, Adele? What are your favorites to write?
I actually love writing love scenes. I think they're fun as hell. And it's funny because every time I get comments back from John, my editor, they always say something like, "This is where you just shine." And I get almost zero notes, except for occasionally at the end I get it. Oh my God! I gotta say, I love that.
I love it.
I love that.
But also one of the things I should add, and to sort of capitalize on what Tiff was saying, is that, being a lifelong reader, I was a reader in many other genres, even when I wasn't reading romance. And I realized looking back, it's like, well, geez, why did I love the Spencer novels? Well, Spencer, Robert B. Parker. Well, of course I love the banter and I love the snark, but I also love the long running love story between him and Susan Silverman. It was those kinds of things. Like all of my favorite fantasy novels had a really strong love story in them, things like that. So yeah, I think it's not an uncommon way to come sort of to the genre itself.
Yeah, I always get super nervous with the love scenes. Like when I wrote Savvy initially, it didn't have love scenes in it. It was kind of more on the women's fiction side. And we were kind of rebranding because I knew I wanted to kind of be in the rom-com space. And so my agent was like, "So you're gonna spice it up or what?" And and I was like, "Okay." But so when I did it, like I wasn't really thinking clearly, obviously, because I was like in a coffee shop the first time I wrote a love scene, and I was like, "That's being in public maybe isn't the best idea," But I didn't learn because I've also done one on a plane, and it was so funny because I had an upgrade. So I had a nice big seat, big table and everything. The woman next to me is like halfway over my shoulder.
Oh my goodness gracious.
As I'm writing, and it was hilarious because every once in a while she'd start giggling, and I was just like, "Ma'am,
okay,
ma'am, eyes on your own paper,
please."
I've got one slightly, like, not better. This is not a competition, but when I wrote one of my independent books, my independently published books, Angling for You, the heroine is a fly fishing guide in that. And I have been fly fishing. I've done some of the things and stuff, but my husband is the expert. He's the guy he's he's on the board of the local Trout Unlimited chapter, and yes, that's a whole thing, right? And so before we went to Oslo, Norway in 2017, he printed out a copy of an early draft and took a red pen to that sucker, sitting next to me on a plane to Norway.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Because I obviously I asked him to
Yeah.
read it
Yeah.
to make
Right.
sure that I got all the fly fishing stuff right. But let me tell you what, that's a nerve-wracking thing to do.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's
Oh my
hilarious.
Yeah.
So with that's actually one of my fears is like writing on a plane, because I've done that before. I've written on a plane and I realize, like, when the screen lights up, like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, the people behind me can totally read
Yeah.
what I'm writing. That's so wild.
I figure
Investing in
they
a privacy
deserve what they
screen is a
get.
good thing. Yeah, I mean, if they want to see it bad enough, they will make a
Yeah,
way.
that is
But
true.
yeah, but yeah, I try. I still write in public all the time, so it just is what it is at this point. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they
Oh
see
gosh.
something, they see it. So, I just happened to see something on Twitter like a week ago, and you know, it feels like it's very cyclical, but we'll see this thing where everything is fine, and then all of a sudden happy ever afters are again questioned
Yes. Oh
on
my.
whether they belong in every single romance. Why is it that having an HEA is so controversial to
Yeah.
people outside of our genre? What is it that they are not understanding that they should? Del, please.
My unifying theory on this topic is the belief by many that misery equals quality.
Mm,
That unless you are, grappling with people who are absolutely miserable, then you are not a serious person and, worthy of serious attention.
mm,
That's
mhm.
my theory.
I like
I
that.
wonder too. I wonder too, like the subsection that of the subsection of the folks who are debating this topic, right? Like, who's in this conversation?
Right.
Because sometimes I will take our conversations out to the general public and they have like no clue what at all, even like the context of what I'm talking about, much more the micro context.
Yeah.
So for many folks that I have, encountered, perhaps like friends that are not in this, who don't work in this industry, when they see a certain cover, they automatically they assume anything with a love story is a romance. It's one of these things. And I'm just wondering if so many voices at once, who really is, who's in this conversation, and
Mhm.
who should we be listening to? And if they're really not saying anything that I believe in, is it almost foolish for me to correct them every single time?
Right. Yeah,
Right.
I think that's such a
It's
great point.
it's so tough because it's a cyclical thing, and I'm like, who brought this up? Is this a new person
Yeah.
bringing this up? Did they just come into the scene? And it's like the re-education is so hard. But also, I would have to say is that, at one point we did have one unifying, right, board, not
Mhm.
board, but one unifying organization
Right.
that we could direct folks to who are new in the industry or who want to delve into the industry. And that there no longer is that. Certainly when I came in as an author, I came in through YA, and in romance, I looked to that organization time and again for all my definitions, right? For what they talked about. And now it's lots of folks, so many voices, and it gets a little muddled sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's a not insignificant portion of the people who restart this conversation endlessly who have just completed a manuscript. They want to call it romance because they see that it's a very large industry. And, of
Right.
course, with so many bookstores now cropping up, like Love Sweet Arrow and, these specialty bookstores, they see it, they see a market, and so they want to shoehorn their book into it. And so they come in very, very hot and often very belligerently saying, well, like, but I wrote this book and why can't I call it romance? Like, okay, why don't you call it mystery then?
Right. Yeah.
Why don't you call it science fiction? Because what are your reasons for wanting to call this book about miserable people who die at the end a romance?
Right. Well, and it's really, it says something that, romance itself carries the rest of the industry.
Mhm.
And I think it's so interesting to me that there are so many people who, whether it's ego or an air of superiority, there's this mindset with some of them that, like romance is beneath them.
Mhm.
So it shouldn't be put on this pedestal, right? And I think that's so fascinating because it's like, then just focus on other things. Why do you even need to come over into this space? Very clearly, the books are getting to where they need to go because that's how we're carrying the industry.
Mhm.
And so it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, it like I have all the time where people are like, oh, well, I don't really read that. I only read nonfiction. And I'm like, that's cool. That's great. Congratulations. I don't care. Like I'm not going to pressure anybody to read something they don't want to read. But what I love about romance is that there is a specific structure to it and the readers know what to expect. And, if it's not done the way that they expect, they're going to be upset. And so if it's a love story, but it's not actually a romance, that's a huge difference. And
Yeah.
you're going to piss off your readers if you don't follow the rules. And so it's a fascinating conversation every time it happens, because I'm always like looking more into the threads and the comments to just see like, what is the justification this time? Or
Yeah.
is it the same one as every other time we've
Yeah.
seen this conversation?
Yeah.
It's a
The
very
genre, it's the respect for genre convention, I think, when it comes to romance, right, is just not there.
Right.
Like if you say that this is a mystery, then everybody says, oh, cool, mystery, right?
Right.
But it's so it's, the deeper conversation is also like who is writing romance, and why is love so disrespected, and why is hope and joy all the way to the end, why is that so wrong?
Mhm.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
and why is the genre so frequently defined, for lack of a better term, by people who do not read it,
Right.
by their perception that it is poorly executed?
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's
You
a
know,
big question.
we could take years to unpack that one, because
Mhm.
I at one point, one of my bosses a few years ago, he wrote short stories, and when I landed at my first agent, he said something like, well, just as long as you don't, you just as long as you don't get published by Harlequin. And I looked at him, I said, why would I not want to be published by the largest publisher in my genre? And he kind of fell back on that, oh, my mother's Harlequins in the 1980s. And I'm just like, you do realize that Fabio has not been on a cover for like 30 years. Update your references.
Right, please.
I mean, because
But
so many people, and I call it the everybody knows argument. Everybody knows that, that you're trashy. I mean, first of all, I will hear this, this trash thing from people who love Blumhouse movies. I mean, those are gleefully trashy. And I am not saying that in a derogatory way, right? But again, because it is largely about the empowerment and good feelings and satisfaction of people who have not historically been expected to expect those things. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
I was listening to a podcast today, and the person led with, unlike what you read in romance novels, and then she went on to say that love isn't a certain way, like really just demean. But you don't hear people say, well, unlike what you see in mystery novels, people aren't killing each other every day. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? It's like, why are you even comparing your lack of whatever to the
Mhm.
fact that you're blaming it all on romance novels. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Just utter ridiculousness.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
just gives you more of this incentive, right, to be able to write romance novels, especially I guess in ours, because we write contemporary too,
Mhm.
is to be able to bring, contemporary stories, with casts that are diverse and that are just wider reaching, right? So to really, again, really pad this backlist of books that will show contemporary love stories, contemporary how folks today interact, because they'll be reading this right in 50 years,
That's
and they're going to
right.
say in 2024, right? These are the three books. These, our books. Here are three books that, show love in 2024.
That's right. That's right. And it's, oh, go ahead, Adele.
Sorry, I was just going to say, even within the genre, because we all certainly have our problems within the genre. Let's
Mhm.
not,
For sure.
let's not be coy about that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it specifically with Tiff's and my book, because both of them have an age gap where the woman is older. And people love to call that a reverse age gap. It's like, excuse me, the age gap is immaterial of the gender, all
That's
right?
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
And are we going to call a sapphic romance with an age gap? What are we going to call that? Like, if you're going to be that sort of mainstream and old-fashioned about your way of looking at the genre itself. But it's funny because when I was reading Tiff's book, I was like, oh my gosh, we're kind of doing some of the
I
same
know.
stuff.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love, well, and it's so great because it's like, with romance, there's only so many tropes, but we're going to see how different people approach it, given their background, their experience, and what it is that they have going on in their mind. But what a thing to think that, in 50 years our stories will be out there, Tiff, right?
Yeah.
It's this year marks 75 years for
Right.
Harlequin.
Yes.
And here you have three Harlequin authors.
Right.
And so it's a cool thing to think, they were out in the 50s, then we had our Fabio era, and then and now here we are in
Yeah.
24 and still going strong and still, putting out stories that are relevant to the time, while some are doing historicals and some are doing, ones that fit certain categories. But romance is still booming, and I think even more so than it did back then. When it comes to romance, let's talk about spice.
Yeah.
Or
the lack of it.
or the lack of, right? Like, what level of spice do you write at versus read at? And
Yeah.
are they different?
Okay, so if there's like 5 jalapenos, right? This is like 5 jalapenos, 5 is like super hot, like super duper, and 1 is 0 to anyway, you guys know it. I am probably like a 1.5, maybe that.
Okay.
But I love to read up to 5 for sure. I mean, and I loved reading both of your books. And I always say that I try to write heat every single time. And I'll even tell my critique partner, April Asher, like, hey, this is the one. And I just can't get it there. And I try, but I read across heat levels, but I think my voice just lends to that lower heat. But I love reading it for sure. And I don't skip it, like I just am like, this is amazing.
Yeah. Adele?
Well, I read it at a reasonably high heat level. Hi Mom, I know you skipped them. It's fine. Because she tells, and I almost send her like, like sticky notes, like, just from here to here, just don't bother.
Right.
But she can see it coming and she starts flipping pages and it's fine.
Yeah.
And I read across the spectrum. I mean, I go through phases where I will like really like want to read something that is, like I will usually, if I'm seeking something out, I want to seek out something that's a little bit more on the explicit side, a little bit more on the high heat side.
Mhm.
But if somebody says this is a closed door book, especially from like a trusted author, I'm like, fine,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. I read everything. I probably, depending on who you ask, because I definitely have gotten mixed feedback about this. I try to write relatively spicy. I would say in my mind, I'm like a 3.5, maybe a 4.
Yeah.
Um,
Say you're 4.
Yeah, I say you're 4 too.
I think that Taj, I think you and I are kind of on the more or less the same.
so yeah, but
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
I've had
A little
people tell me that they were like, oh, well, I mean 2. And I was like, really? Okay. I was like, but what do I have to do to get to 5? Like, good grief, you know?
But I
So-
think you will seriously need to bust out some like stuff. But
Some stuff.
yeah. But I mean, I get the same thing too. So like
Mhm.
you know, I can't some of my because of my I still use an RSS reader and I still get some of the review blogs and you know, so
Sure.
I still see some of the reviews that cross my screen.
Mhm.
And you know, I had one and I can't remember which, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And they said heat level warm, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
It's like,
I see
well,
that every once
depending
in a
on
while,
what
and I'm
you
like,
read.
okay,
Yeah.
well, I must have missed the mark somehow for some of them. But other people are like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
okay, so my parents do read my books. My uncle is a pastor, he reads my books.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
my dad, I just talked to him, his 70th birthday was last week.
Oh.
And he's like, I'm halfway through your book. And I was like, okay, well, get ready. And he's like, well, there was a moment in the beginning, and I was like, that was nothing. You really have to prepare yourself. Because I offer to like tape pages together or put a post-it or something. My mom doesn't care. She loves reading romance, but my dad, my uncle literally asked, I had a reading at Oakland Public Library, and his question was, are you going to have books come out where you don't have this explicit material? And I was like, if it's for adults, no.
Yeah.
All of it's going to have some of this in there. And he was like, I don't know what to do with that. And I said, just skip the pages. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I've
he
written
wants to read it.
I've written 2 women's fiction manuscripts, and they're one of them is like no heat really, and one of them is lower.
Mm.
But you know, and it was almost kind of like, Mom, this is for you.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so
But-
true. My dad, okay, so he gave me advice on how to be a bestseller. Okay. So what he said,
don't you love it when they do that?
they're hilarious. And so he was like, well, you know what you have to do. And I was like, what's that? He's like, you have to kill somebody. And I was like, well, that doesn't
Interesting.
really work well. For if I'm killing off the love interest, then it's not a romance anymore.
No,
And
but
he
you
was
could have
like-
killed the doctor because he ended up being a real teabag.
And so he was
I
like,
don't know what our heat level is for language in this, so I'm keeping it.
oh, what? I assume
Ish.
we're all adults here. We're good. But in my mind, I'm like, okay. And in my mind, I do intend to eventually write women's fiction. And I have like a YA proposal together. And I would love to do a line of cozies, but slightly break the rules because I do want sex on the page and I do want them to use profanity. And I know that kind of breaks the cozy rules, but I don't care. And you know, so like I was like, even when I write something where somebody dies, like it's still gonna have sex on the page, Pop. Like I don't know what to tell you. You gotta get ready for it. My YA will be like much tamer, but like,
Yeah.
everything else, you know, like to me, it's like it's just a part of life. It is what it is. And so I honestly I love that I do have friends and family on the male side who are reading it, and seeing their reactions has been a lot of fun
Oh,
because
neat. Yeah.
so fascinating.
Oh, my brother
Yes.
and his fiance, both men, got the audiobook of my novella, The Wedding Bait, which
Ooh,
I narrated.
That's cool.
that is cool.
They
Wow.
listened to it together. I'm like,
Yes.
Brian. And later on, he's like, I was traumatized. I was like, I warned you.
So not only is it you writing, it's you narrating it.
He's like, my
He's like,
sister said
no.
this." I'm like, dude.
My brother like buys all my books. He's like, I bought it. And I think he tried to read it. And he's just, I just kept hearing you. I kept hearing you, Ate. I just couldn't do it. And
Oh,
I'm like, it's okay. It's
Oh,
That's
and
so-
that's with me. That's a 1.1 one jalapeno. And still, right?
No.
It's like, no, I cannot.
no, there's
Fine.
kissing. Oh, well, trust me, in the wedding bait, there's a lot more than kissing.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, but so additionally, so this is not on the spice level, but if you look at my Instagram, I posted yesterday with permission. My cousin went to a local bookshop to purchase Fake Flame a couple of days ago, and she sends me this long text about this guy who was an absolute utter jackwagon to her.
Oh my goodness.
When she was looking for the book. And so she sends me this text, and he's sort of like, she starts with describing him as douche canoe. And as she puts it, because she's very non-confrontational, she says, this was thinky no speaky. And then she goes through these various like iterations of, douche wad, oh, grand poobah of doucheness, choo choo. She just goes through it because she's a singer-songwriter. So she's also a wordsmith.
Yeah, I love it.
And
Love
she
it.
just like, and I'm like, oh, may I please
You-
post the socials because oh my God. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
love it. I
That's
love
so
it.
funny.
So I was on a panel recently and someone asked this question, and I think it's such a good question, just in terms of kind of where we are in the romance space right now. And it's relevant to just recognition in terms of our stories and inclusivity. And so recently, an institution for readers and book lovers created a set of awards that included categories, best literary fiction, all these things, right? But there was one called Best Diverse Story.
Oh my goodness.
And, tell me about your reaction, Tiff, and why do you think that helps or hinders a space like romance?
So I come from an immigrant background. Okay, so the whole idea of you should be grateful always kind of seeps in first, right? Like, oh, thank goodness. I'm glad that they are going to give shine to a diverse story, right?
Right.
But then that's quickly stomped by, years of living here in the United States and understanding my value in the world, and understand the value of our stories, of all diverse stories, right, in the world.
Yeah.
And that I think we need to ask more I think, first of all, we shouldn't underestimate our readers,
Right.
to not give them stories that are diverse already, like from the get-go. And so to have to award something that's diverse when it should be automatic,
Mhm.
kind of it just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
But then we look at all the statistics again, right? We look at the statistics of the books that are hitting the lists, the books that are been giving the shine in certain listicles and important book clubs and things like that. And you realize that, wow, diversity in publishing is not great still, so right, a lot of emotions comes through.
Yeah.
And it's nuanced, I guess, for the situation and me having to parse through how I feel. And the only thing that I can think of is to continue to write more stories that should be status quo diverse, right? And then to be able to hopefully work with other authors or aspiring authors to be able to encourage them to write their own stories, which I know are going to be diverse. So it's one of these things, like I'm already like starting to creep up. It's so personal. It's like the same. There was one time I was asked at a panel, why is it important for you to talk about being Filipino? And I'm like, this is a basic question. This is like you asking me what my name is. This is not and then of course that little, well, aren't you glad that they're bringing it up for you to be able to talk about it? And it's like, yeah, okay, fine. But that's like kindergarten level of this
Right.
whole we've whole system, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's
Yeah.
where I am.
When I saw the category, I was really upset.
Mhm.
And I was upset because I'm like, okay, you broke out all the other age ranges and
That's right.
genres, and
Mhm.
you lumped all diversity into one category. And so it feels a lot like segregation.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's basically like, okay, well, we don't actually want to recognize you in fantasy or in these other things. We're gonna just lump you guys together so you can feel like you got something,
Mhm.
and then we can go on about our business. And what's so hard about that is, we've been working so hard to convince publishers to bring more representation in and to not stop at one per imprint, to make
Mhm.
sure that they understand, you and I are both Filipino, like we are not monolithic. Our experiences are so different. And, to be able to say like, well, we're just going to put you guys all in this one little space, and this is where you belong now. We'll take the
Mhm.
rest.
Mhm.
That's how it feels. And I don't think that they really had any foresight into what they were doing, or even like how that backlash was going to come back to them.
Right. Right.
I will just say that nobody would ever ask me. I have several books that I've written where the protagonists are Norwegian.
Mm-hmm.
It's my particular background. Nobody would ever ask me that question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so if anybody ever asks you that question, feel free to say, would you ask my friend Adele why she writes Norwegian?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because it's like on one level, it's like you don't necessarily want to answer the question, because it's like, we're at the end of the day, we're humans, and we're all
Right.
coming from, writing human experiences,
Mhm.
regardless of what our backgrounds are. But on
Yeah.
the other side of the coin, it's like, I want to raise awareness
Right.
to,
Right.
this representation, and to show that, like we're putting these stories out into the world so that different people can feel seen, hopefully. And at least that's the goal. And so it's hard, because it's like, on one hand, it's upsetting, because you want to be able to just have people take it at face value, and be open to reading the experience regardless of whether it's a diverse book or not. Because when we were coming up, we basically read a bunch of white romance because
Yes.
that's what was out there.
Yeah.
And so like the ask is, now that there are some of us out there, hey, everyone else, like, can you see yourself in our shoes, just in this story,
Yes.
just in this moment? And I
That's right.
think that's been an interesting conversation and
Yeah.
lack of response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
We got some questions from the audience. Um, One person said, Taj, did your male relatives give you suggestions on how to write men after their
Ah.
work? And that's a great question. No, they did not. If they had, I would have laughed at them, because it would have been like they were mansplaining men to me, like I haven't met many myself.
And like
But
you haven't read the literary canon that is so many male
come
authors.
Yeah,
on. I mean,
that's
we're
right.
surrounded by them, and we constantly have to deal with their privilege all the time. So
Mhm.
we know men.
Yes.
But when it comes to the male love interest that I write, I pull from my group, my friend group a lot. I have a good number of guy friends that I don't find to be toxic, or stuck in this whole like masculinity alpha Kevin Samuels situation. And so I really pull from the desire to want to show that there really are good guys out there. Yeah, it's hard to find sometimes, and I'm the single girl here. Like, my title literally is "The Good Ones Are Taken." So, but are there good ones out there? Absolutely. And so like my focus is showing those healthy ones that deal with their issues and address things. And they may not always get it right. They shouldn't, because they have to be human beings, right? They can't be perfect. But I do want them to not fall into just that constant toxicity that we see all over social media and everywhere else. And so I just try to like not lean into the trauma of it all.
Mhm.
Yeah. The next question is, hi, Tiff, Taj, and Adele. Thank you for this event. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice when writing your first novel, what would it be? That's a great question. It was actually one of my questions too. Adele, you want to start?
Oh, here's the problem. I don't think I would have listened
Mm.
if I was given this advice, which is I'm an Aries. I am an impatient person by nature. I am an impulsive person by nature. And when I finished my first manuscript, I was just like so many other authors, just like, oh my God, just I need to do everything, all the things with this manuscript. Put it in a drawer for a month.
Yeah.
Just put it away. Go ahead and work on something else. You don't have to stop writing.
Mhm.
But just because that's the thing about writing your first novel, your first manuscript, is that you learn that's unless you're completely like either very lucky or very brilliant or both. That first manuscript is going to be your training wheels.
Mhm.
It is not probably going to be publishable. And you need to get okay with that. Because
Uh-oh, your sound just went out again, Adele. Your sound's out.
Tech support, tech support. You might have to click or try again. Yeah, you can leave and join again, Marissa said. Oh,
Want to
so
answer while
sad.
she's
Yeah.
resetting.
Well, I love that Adele premised that she's an Aries, and so she would have acted a certain way because I'm a Virgo, and Virgos act a little bit different. And as a young Virgo, I wanted somebody to tell me exactly what to do and when. And I think to her, I would say, because I was writing all these tiny stories in my diaries, is that the key is to just never stop. Just don't stop, because I would have wanted to do things a specific way. And if somebody would have told me that I needed to, or that possibly I should write in some kind of a structure or give me like a genre convention, I think I would have just been like, too much,
Yeah.
because I would have wanted to write it a specific way. So to a young Virgo Tiff, I would say just right.
I love it.
Just right.
I love it.
Don't
And
stop.
it's so funny that all of our advice would have to do with our signs because I'm
Yeah.
a Capricorn. And so I am a perfectionist, especially when it comes to myself.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so like when I was in law school, I attempted my first novels. I attempted 5 in law school. Never finished any of them.
and I'm sorry, so you can hear me now?
Yes.
As someone who also went to law school and also works in law school, writing a novel
Yeah.
in law school.
I know, my brain
Yeah.
just went.
Yeah, my brain is exploding all over. And pay me no mind. Okay, go ahead.
What's funny is I was also a private chef in law school. So
Oh my goodness gracious, Taj.
I'm a Capricorn. I told you already. Like this is what we do. We just
I
we have
love
to be
it.
busy. Like we can't help ourselves. And to anybody listening, you know, like if you're a Capricorn, you know what I'm talking about. You don't have to receive it. It's okay. I'm not attacking you. But for me, literally my issue was I would start and not finish because it wasn't perfect on the page. And you know, your advice about just keep going, Tiff, is what I needed. And it was also stop going back.
Mm.
Just move forward, finish the book, and then you can worry about revising. Because the reminder that I needed was this is just a draft. Nothing about it has to be perfect. It's expected that it's going to be rough. Well, that's why it's called that. So let it be, and you know, let it become a full book. Otherwise, you're never actually going to have one. And so, you know, I had to kind of go against my Capricorn instincts and allow myself to finish the story. And so Savvy was actually the first novel that I finished. because I just wouldn't let myself do it before.
Wow.
And it was the advice of a friend who's an Aries who was like, you're making excuses. You need to just do the thing. And I had to just kind of take it on the chin and do the thing.
So now it really makes sense then that, right? I think the last time you and I spoke, you were dictating a manuscript, and it
Yes.
totally makes sense now that you're a Capricorn that needed to finish, because it makes sense too that I like to write on the free write, because you cannot
You
go
can't
back and edit. You
Yeah.
just have to keep going, and I write faster that way. That's so, I love that, how that all
Yeah.
comes together.
Yeah, Adele, the book that I'm working on getting to my editor, I dictated about 20 of the chapters. And it's the first time I've tried to do that much, not like looking at a screen. But I was finding that the blank screen was just giving me so much anxiety that I couldn't move forward. I was just paralyzed. And so I just kind of would go sit on the couch with voice memos, or because, you know, the procrastination side of the writer in me like was taking over, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm gonna do laundry. And so I would just do voice memos while folding laundry. And then it made my Capricorn self feel productive, which is, you know, a thing. So mess.
I have to say I do struggle sometimes with what I just wrote is not the platonic ideal of what I wanted it to be. Regardless. And I have learned to like, because that ask Lisa Lynn about my Aries. No, you just need butt in chair, stop it. You know, it's a kind of tough love that I give her on the regular. But I as a young person was just very, very good at spitting out like a very good first draft and like schoolwork and things like that. And so I still struggle with it's not perfect straight out of the can.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's just a not uncommon thing in general. And I do my drafting process is I do back up a little bit, and usually because I work in Scrivener, I usually just back up to the last scene, beginning of the last scene, do a little light editing as I go, but that helps me kind of like get into an on-ramp situation where I don't necessarily repeat myself too much. But yeah, that isn't perfect coming right out for the first time. That struggle is absolutely real.
Yeah. My hard part was when I would go back to try to on-ramp, I would go all the way to the beginning.
Oh no.
Whoa.
And like, that's how bad it is. Like literally the Capricorn in me was like, well, everything has to be perfect up until this point, and then on-ramp.
Why you have editors?
Literally, like hot mess. Do you have a favorite trope, either of you?
I always answer this differently every single time depending on what I'm reading.
Okay.
So, Vampires of El Norte, I just finished it. And that is a childhood friends to enemies to lovers.
Ooh.
And so, well, childhood friends to disappearing to enemies. And I love it now. I love it, because having that history just really dug something inside of me, you know, just of looking back a decade, 2 decades, and understanding that this person knows every bit of you. I don't know. Maybe that's the next manuscript. I don't know, but it's interesting how like my favorites kind of change especially if I read a really great story with that trope.
Adele?
Mine, I do love fake dating, but it's one of those things. It's not to pat myself on the back. It's a tough one to stick the landing because you really have to have a good reason.
Yeah.
For why they're going to go through this ruse. and I actually, not to unpat myself in the back, but I think I picked the easiest reason in the book, which is if you have an abusive ex hanging around and you want to signal that she has truly, well and truly moved on, these toxic men are often going to take another man has claimed her
Mhm.
as the a good enough reason to leave well enough alone. Not always, but sometimes.
Mhm.
But yeah, I know it's funny because I there's so many tropes that I really love, and there's a few that I really despise. But what I've said this before in other public fora, so this is nothing new. Um, there's a couple of I'm not sure I'll ever love an amnesia book. Let's just put that right out there.
Mm.
But the um secret baby, not the way you did it, Tiff, but you know,
Yeah.
the standard secret
Yeah.
baby in
Yeah.
contemporary,
Yeah.
I usually have a problem with. And I usually have a huge problem with billionaires.
Mm.
Mm.
But when somebody really sticks the landing on those ones that I don't like,
Yeah.
those books are bound to be on my favorites list forever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, for instance, there's a reason why I absolutely adore Serena Bowen's Bountiful and reread it probably once a year, because that's a secret baby where there's a really good reason why she couldn't find him.
Mhm.
And I really, really love Courtney Milan's Trade Me
Oh yeah.
for
Yeah, that's a good
Billionaires.
one. That's a really
Mhm.
good one.
But I mean, I came to that book because I was listening to Smart Bitches, and she was on Smart Bitches, and she was saying, "Yeah, well, I've written this book, and it all came about because I said to a friend, oh, I'd never write contemporary unless I could do X, and I never write a billionaire unless I could do Y." And she told us all the reasons why she would never write this book, and then she
I,
wrote this book,
I love that though.
right?
So much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, my favorite has been for a while, Second Chance Romance.
Mhm.
I love the tension. I love that something about it didn't work before,
Mhm.
and now there's this gap between them.
Mhm.
And there's also this angst of I think I feel a way, but they probably don't feel a way, but maybe they feel a way. I think they're
Yeah.
hinting they feel like what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
That
And the
push.
fear of like, will it happen again? Will we be torn apart again? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Me and Mr. B.
Really?
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes. We literally
Okay.
are a second chance romance. We broke up, and about 5 or 6 years later,
5 or 6 years. Wow.
huh?
That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anybody ever needs a consult on a, on a second chance, I can tell you, like, because sometimes you see crossing social media, oh, I don't buy it because if they broke up for good reasons, they should never get back together. And it's like, guess what? When you're 25 and you're stupid,
Mm.
Yeah.
you break up because we're not, or you're just in different places.
Yeah.
Because at
Yeah.
25, you know, a, two 25-year-olds, one of them can be emotionally 35 and one of them can be emotionally 16,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And that wasn't quite what our situation was, but you know, we were definitely in different places because I was graduating from law school and he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an impasse, okay? But
Mhm.
fundamentally, I mean, 21 years later of marriage, yeah, it can work.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think we have time for one last question. And this one's going to be kind of a slight combination of a question. What's up next in terms of next projects? And, you know, with contemporary romance, are you seeing any shift in trends on what authors are currently excited about writing?
Hmm. I'm not great at trends, obviously. Like I'm just like I can't predict those things at all.
Yeah.
I do know that among my author friends, in general, we're really expanding our view of what we can write,
Mhm.
right? So we're looking at you know, ideas and tropes and story ideas that are hopefully, you know, pushing boundaries, or some folks are looking at other genres to write in, or right, and changing lanes altogether. I think it's just, I do think it's because though, the folks that I hang out with are kind of in the same like we've all written more than a few books. So I feel like we're all kind of in the same space.
Yeah.
But for me, I've got the second book of the series coming out in the spring of 2025, and the third book in the summer. And then I am doing the proposal for the fourth book, which I hope will get picked up. And then I'm writing a few things for a few projects. You always have your hands in something,
That's right.
it's there's so many stories to be able to tell.
Love that. What about you, Adele?
So I have my first Christmas romance is coming out in
Yay!
October.
I love holiday romances.
Me too.
Yay!
I was like, wow, I've written a bunch of books and I've never written a holiday romance. How the heck did that ever happen? And so that is called The Antisocial Season, and it comes out in October of this year. And then the third book in this series, which are called First Responders. So for anybody who's read Fake Flame, the heroine of The Antisocial Season is Thea.
Oh, yay.
Yes, she's a bit of a hot mess, and I love her to
Love
pieces.
it.
And so I've just polished off the final edit for that. And that is also coming out in audio,
Awesome.
which
great.
I can say because it's up on Audible. So there's been like no announcement made, but yeah, it's going to be also be coming out in audio, and it's the same narrator who narrated the Center Stage series. Monica Plant is going to be narrating it as well, which I'm so excited about because she's such a lovely person, and I'm just really, delighted to work with her again. And then next fall, I think it's going to be a while. The third book in the series, which is tentatively titled Stunner, is coming out, and the first responder in that book is going to be a paramedic, a nurse paramedic.
That makes me happy. I love that.
I might send a manuscript to you for some
Yes,
fact checking.
please. Yes.
Who he basically scoops the heroine up off of the pavement after she slips and falls and hits her head, hence Stunner. And also he happens to be the former best friend of her big brother.
Oh, great.
Ah,
That should be interesting.
And then she has a wedding to go to, and her mother is not going to let her drive all the way to North Carolina from the DC area, so she hires him to be her driver slash nurse slash date. So it's kind of slightly fake dating, definitely road trip, definitely only one bed. I mean, I basically went, how many tropes can I mash into this one manuscript?
Yes.
love it.
I love it.
And then I have a proposal sitting on my agent's desk, hopefully for more Harlequins, and I'm working on a
Yay.
totally different proposal, which is a little more on the like big side in terms of scope of the story, which I have no idea where we're going to send that, but hopefully.
That's so
I
cool.
don't know why this keeps doing that.
It's like reading your body language.
Apparently,
I thought that somebody was doing it. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Where's my button? I was like,
There's
it's an Apple
there's a
thing.
setting. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
like you can turn it off. I don't even know how, but I know
Oh my
on
gosh.
mine it's not on, but yeah.
When I'm FaceTiming with my mother, it frequently does just weird stuff, and I find it so funny that I haven't figured out how to turn it off, because I could easily figure out how to turn it off because in my day job, I'm an instructional technology librarian. This would not be hard for me, but I find it so like quirkily weird that I just keep it.
That's so funny. How about you, Taj?
I would
Yeah,
say,
what's up?
trend wise, the funny thing is, I think for a lot of us, like we'll see like, oh well, I'm gonna do like a friends to lovers, and then like a bunch of our colleagues will be like along that same wavelength. We haven't talked about it. It just happens. And so
All of the witch books that happened, all of the witch books, like I'm
Yeah.
just like, where did what in the zeitgeist said that witches were a thing?
Literally, like my like the Good Ones Are Taken is in the Steam box from the Steamy Lit team, and all 3 books in the box are friends to lovers.
Oh my gosh.
So like I don't know how it happened, it just happened, like so we don't really most of us are not looking to follow a trend, because by the time we write it and it actually gets published, so much time has passed and the trend's over. So I think we just write the next thing that we're really interested in writing that someone wants to
Mhm.
buy. So for me, my next one is currently titled The Dating Prohibition. I'm fighting to keep that title right now. And it's based here in DC, and partially in Charleston. And so the main character, it's a brother's best friend romance.
Oh my goodness.
And what's fun about it is, the main character has been doing some soul searching, and she's decided that she wants to open a bar that has a speakeasy supper club in the back. And the love interest, her brother's best friend, is a historic preservation professor. And so he is on sabbatical doing research about historic buildings. And of course, given Prohibition era, speakeasies, Harlem Renaissance, she would really love to have her business be in a historic space. And so as she's visiting all these locations and trying to get her business stuff in order, he goes with her to these locations because he needs to do his research. And as her brother and his wife are opening their restaurant, they're there to help out, and they almost kissed one night, and he tells her that she's off limits. And so now she is trying to show him what he would be missing. And so it's a lot of fun.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
I'm also I'm gonna do, on the indie side, I'm gonna do a novella this summer that is connected to Zora Books or Happy Ever After. And so that's going to be Emma's story, Zora's best friend. It'll be my first sapphic.
Mhm.
And basically Emma's situation is she's been kind of maintaining a rotation of men, because she said she didn't want to date a woman until she was ready to fall in love. And now that she's moving out of Zora's house and on her own, she's ready. And so she ends up
Oh.
falling for her landlady.
Oh, so when you say novella,
Uh-huh.
what do you mean by that? Is it 30,000? Is it like 20,000, 40,000?
It's probably going to be somewhere around 30 to 40.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can range. I mean, the wedding bait is 20 and so
Yeah.
it's short, but
Yeah.
but people, it's my best rated book to date. So
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
because sometimes
Yeah.
you
And I
just want
also-
a shorter story for sure.
Yeah, well,
Right, exactly.
well, and I released it on New Year's Day of the year it came out, figuring that people are home, they're bored, they whatever, and it sold great on day one, and it has been just a nice, tidy little
Mhm.
thing ever since. And it's
Especially if there's heat in it too, like
there's heat
short
in it,
and hot.
and there's a sapphic secondary love story, because the wedding in question is the protagonist, the female protagonist's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and she's marrying another woman. She's the daughter is a cinematographer, and the bride, the other bride, is basically a flautist who is a black Chloe Flower. If you've ever seen Chloe Flower on, with wonderful pianist. And I was like, I need to give her a much more portable instrument.
Love it. I love it.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you both for being here. I'm so glad that we got to come together to celebrate. All of our books came out the same day. And
Yay,
so,
Harlequin.
really cool vibes to be able to come together, especially with a romance bookstore such as Love Sweet Arrow. We're
Mhm.
so happy to, have been here with you all. And thank you for asking the questions that you did. They were wonderful questions. And hopefully we will be able to come and visit the bookstore together very soon.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you Tiff, Taj, and Adele for hosting this wonderful event. And it was just a pleasure getting to hear about your new releases and the world of romance in general.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you